Hey guys, Legacy. This is going to be a reassembly of the D-Boy Scar L, including the gearbox. This gearbox probably for any version 2 gearbox, but it's already assembled minus two pieces, which I'm going to do for you right now. So just quickly going over things. Um, this is the trigger, safety arm, contacts, tappet plate, sorry about that, sector, step or spur, and bevel gears. Over here is the anti-reversal latch, which goes right underneath the bevel gear. Spring guide, piston, cylinder, cylinder head, air nozzle. And those are the main parts. Now you have little springs in here too, but basically the gears will go in the bushings, which go in the shell. So the bushings go in the shell, gears are placed in the bushings. The anti-reverse latch has a little post that goes in. You'll see that on the gearbox shell. Trigger with the trigger spring, a little post that goes in. Tappet plate connects to the air nozzle, and you slide the air nozzle over the cylinder head. There's a little nozzle in here that goes right on. Piston and piston head screw together, go into the cylinder, which is attached to the cylinder head. Spring and spring guide, you slide them right into the piston. And that's about it for the most part. So from here, now you need to attach the tappet plate spring to this post and put the spring guide into the gearbox. I'm going to go ahead and do that for you. Now I have a modified tappet plate spring, and my pliers broke, so I'm going to punch. So I should get it. There we go. All you're doing is sliding it right over the post. It's pretty easy. Now that you have your gearbox all together and set up, you're on your last step, which is putting the spring and spring guide into the gearbox. So when I'm a righty, how I like to do it is turning the gearbox upside down. So the back part and the top is facing me like this. Now, what I do is I take either pliers or a punch or a pin, and I put it into the back end, the hole, in the spring guide. So this is going to go in the hole, and my thumb is going to go on top here. Now I take my hand and spread it out and put it on top of the rest of the gearbox to keep everything in place, because if you do not do this, the cylinder will want to pop out of place. So now that you have this, you're going to push this into the gearbox and then drop it so that the tabs line up. Now you're going to take your index finger, hold down the spring guide, then swap it to your middle finger, and take your index finger and hold down the cylinder as you take your other hand off. Check your hand for shims, make sure nothing came off, and you're good to go. Now I switch to my left hand, then I pick up the top of the gearbox shell, put my middle finger and my thumb through the spring guide and cylinder holes, gently lower this directly on top. Then I use my thumb and my middle finger in my right hand to hold down the cylinder and spring guide as this lowers onto the gearbox shell. You should hear a click and everything's in place. To double check, you're going to pull your trigger. Make sure you can pull the trigger. Move your tappet plate and air nozzle back. That should move freely. Check to make sure your gear axles are in all the bushings and your anti-reversal latch is in its spot. Then finally, check to make sure two last things, the cylinder is in the corners. It should fit flush in these corners. It should not be overlapping. And the back part should be a closed crease. There shouldn't be space near the spring guide. So now that your gearbox is back together, you're going to hold it in place while you screw it in. This is a tedious, I might fast forward this, but this is standard for version 2. I know version 3s will have screws in the bottom, and some have screws on top, some have the plate on top, but for the most part this is kind of what you do next. Now these screws on top, sometimes they have washers on them, sometimes they don't. Mine do, so you want to make sure you put those in as well. Now this gearbox, obviously, if you haven't noticed already, is not stock in any way, shape, or form for a D-Boy Scar. Just so you don't get your hopes up in what you're getting, or that you don't get like confused as to why your D-Boy Scar doesn't look like this one. The shell is the same, the trigger is the same, and the contact box. A lot of people call that differently. The contacts, trigger housing, whatever you want to call it. Those are stock D-Boys still. Other than that, every other spring or piece in here has been swapped out for an aftermarket part. So don't get discouraged if this does not look like your gearbox. Your gearbox should have this same black shell with clear air nozzle, brass cylinder with a port. It'll have a different spring and spring guide. It'll have a black plastic spring guide with bearings. It'll have a regular gray silver color spring. It'll have gray color metal bushings, and the same trigger without the modifications on the side. You're going to want to screw each screw in almost completely tight around the gearbox, not all the way down. And then once they're all in, you're going to go back and tighten them down.